The music video for the song One and Only by Korean girl group LOONA is an incredible example of how design elements can be used to tell a story. In this instance, the video must tell an intricate story about the girl whom it's about, and her name is Gowon. The design elements are utilized flawlessly to tell her story. But before we get into analyzing the video, let's establish some context. In her group of friends, Gowon is pushed to become a leader by another girl, almost in a puppet-like way. She has to become enlightened, symbolized by eating a fruit reminiscent to the fruit of knowledge in the Bible, to realize her true purpose, which is symbolized by her shadow. She is to become it, a total contrast to her real self. This theme of leadership, kingship, and royalty is constantly established with the use of crown imagery, fancy dress, and the building she is in. Her metamorphosis is showcased with the use of design elements. At the beginning, she's surrounded by dark frames and appears small. When she takes a bite of her fruit, she chooses to leave Luna's Garden of Eden to become her true self on her journey of self-love. Starting out with the themes of framing, composition, and texture, in this shot the negative space traps Gowon away from her own shadow, which is stark and visible, in comparison to her own self, small and in the shadows. The shot doesn't need any more textural details to establish the theme strongly, so it even avoids it. She seems to be stuck between two states, undecided, as we can make out that she is in a doorway. She's trapped between her meek self who hides in the shadows, and her enlightenment, symbolized by the literal light spilling into the room and outlining her frame. The light is the path that is laid out clearly ahead of her, showing texture, and her current self is untextured and unsure. Gowon's change is likened to the one of a butterfly, with her undergoing a cocooning process. Here, she's insignificant to the frame and out of sight. In the shadows, away from the focal point, the goal, the crown. Still, the theme of regalness is still there due to the texture of the draping fabric, and its setting of the structured, precise archetype. A simple shot of Gowon draped over with fabric symbolizes her metamorphosis. Like a cocoon, it is dark and cramped, with the dark bordering frame blending in with the dark tones, giving us almost a claustrophobic. However, we can still make out the beautiful texture of the drapery, preluding to her future regal self. The light straight above her head symbolizes a crown. The table full of contrasting lit textures and shapes add to the sense of plentifulness and royalty, her sitting at the top, like a ruler. The fruits that have led to the enlightenment of other girls in the story are lit and visible on the table. They're introduced, and so they must add to the story in the following shots. So then, Gowon takes a bite of her fruit. After her transformation, we can see the textures on her so much more clearly. She becomes a lot more important visually. However, Eve, the one who puts the crown on her, is out of frame and casts a shadow over her, displaying her role of the puppet master crowning her puppet leader.
This video cleverly employs negative and positive shape in every single frame. I took notes of the ones that stood out most to me visually and allegorically. This scene is very much visually similar to Lottie Reiniger's animations, which is fitting since Gowon is like a paper puppet controlled by Eve. The clear silhouette makes it visually interesting as a standalone scene even without the allegory. This silhouette also resembles a crown, which hints at what happens next in her story. The shadow imagery can also be interpreted as Gowon having a lack of identity as there are no faces distinguishing her with the other dancers. And the dead trees on the side adds to the lifelessness of the scene. The doorway imagery is repeated throughout this video as a symbolism of a threshold and Gowon's metamorphosis. The shot uses negative space clearly to create a claustrophobic atmosphere, communicating that Gowon feels trapped. The visual imagery is representing her inner turmoil. Here we have an archway, again another threshold imagery to symbolize change. The figure is centered and the scene frames the figure with the negative shape of the archway. The crown imagery is being hinted to us again, this time with the chandelier hanging right above Gowon's head, and the archway is clearly bringing our focus to the figure and the object. In the next shot, the chandelier lights up, which brings our focus to it once again, and a light above one's head is also a very repeated imagery in media to represent an idea or enlightenment. This shot frames the shadow as its focal point more than the figure, with Gowon being part of the negative shape and almost unnoticeable. The shadow putting a physical crown on, whereas Gowon only had a chandelier hanging above her head in the previous scenes, meaning that she hasn't earned her leadership yet. The use of shadow in this shot is interesting to me as it is both negative and positive shape. The crown symbolism appears again here after the shot of her shadow putting on the crown, making the subtle imagery more clear. This shot really pushes the shadow and contrast, The use of shadow as negative space again consuming Gowon, representing that she is tainted by others' thoughts. This shot uses shadow as negative space to frame the figure, dressed in white. Although Yves is coming from the light source, she is blended with the shadow and she is walking against the light, suggesting that she is a menacing character, covering Gowon's light and shadowing her figure, revealing to us that she is the puppeteer from the beginning.
The primary light source in almost every shot is natural window light, creating a strong contrast in the tone of most shots. Windows are a symbol of new ideas, change, and opportunity, so it makes sense that they are utilized for Gowon's story. They can also represent the outside world influencing her inner self. The viewer is in darkness, with Gowon on the brink of or in direct light. The viewer lives in the shadows to experience Gowon's point of view. This treatment of tone and lighting really emphasizes how Gowon can be compared to royalty, because the video takes inspiration from the painting techniques of chiaroscuro and tenebrism that originated in the Renaissance era. Tenebrism is a style of painting using especially pronounced chiaroscuro, which means violent contrasts in lighting and paintings. We see exactly this in almost every shot. Paired with the portrait framing, each shot has the atmosphere of a Renaissance or regal portrait painting. This really emphasizes the significance of her role within her group, as she achieves leadership through self-love.